As she was walking, she heard a strange sound. When she turned around, to her greatest shock, she saw Ethan transforming into a half-human and half-snake. She quickly hid behind the tree so he could not see her when he turned around. Mila was so terrified and shaky, she tried her possible best not to scream or make any noise. No. 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 Once upon a time, there lived a beautiful princess named Leela. She was the only child of her father. Her father, the king, adored and cherished her so much. Whatever she asked for, he never hesitated to grant to her. Elle had a maid named Mia, who she was very close to. They were like siblings. Anyone who didn't know them might think they were siblings. Elle was a very beautiful girl, admired by all the eligible young men in their village and across. Kings from other villages would always bring their sons to marry Lee, but she would decline, saying she didn't like any of them. Her father, the king, was worried about his daughter Laren. He asked her why she always turned down her suitors. She told him that when she saw a man she truly loved, she would bring him home. Her father, the king, accepted and told her to choose her suitor wisely. Oh. One day, Lyre and her maid, Mia, were strolling down the village, enjoying the vibrant market stalls and the chatter of villagers, when a very handsome young man approached them. He was so handsome that no woman could resist his handsome face and his captivating smile. He turned to Lyre and said, "You are so beautiful, like the morning sun. Your beauty could make a blind man see." He kept on showering praises on Lyre, and this made her blush. Lyra smiled and asked him who he was. He replied, saying his name was Nate, that he's from the neighboring village, and that he came to get some fresh fruits from the market. Ethan then told the princess that he would be taking his leave to go to the market to get the fruits before the market women sold all the fresh fruits. As he was about leaving, Elle told him if they could meet another day. He smiled and said, "Anything for you, my princess." Then he left. When he left, Mia, the princess's maid, smiled and asked Lyra why she requested to see him again. Lyra told her that she thought she had finally found the one she loved. They both laughed and left. On their way home, Lyra kept on describing the handsome face of Nate. The next morning, Lyra, the princess, could not hold back her excitement. She called Mia and told her to accompany her to see Nate. Mia smiled and teased her, saying, "I know you did not sleep last night because of Nate." The princess replied and said to Mia, "No woman in her right senses would see Nate and not think of him all night." The princess and her maid then went back to the same spot where she met Ethan to wait for him. Soon, Ethan arrived, dressed in a simple tunic that accentuated his charm. The princess was so happy to see him that as Mia was about leaving to give them some privacy to discuss, she noticed that Nate was barefooted, and she also remembered that the last time she saw him, he was also barefooted. After the princess and Nate finished discussing and having their lovely moment, Ethan was about to take his leave when the princess told him she would like to escort him to his village, but he declined and left. When Ethan had left, Mia told the princess that she noticed Ethan was always barefooted. The princess told Mia maybe he just didn't like wearing footwear. Mia told her, "Who on earth doesn't like wearing footwear?" Mia was unsettled. She was having a bad feeling about Ethan, but did not say anything to the princess. The princess kept on seeing Nate for some time, and when he declared his intentions of marrying her, Lyra was so happy that finally he had said what she had waited patiently to hear from him for so long. She took Nate to her father, the king, who accepted that Nate could marry his daughter if that would make her happy. Ethan told the king that he would be coming with his people for the marriage rites. When Ethan left the palace, Mia visited the princess in her room to discuss with her. She told her she was not comfortable with her marrying Ethan, that she didn't even really know him, and that they had not visited his village before, let alone seen his family members. The princess told Mia not to worry, that Nate meant no harm and was a nice person. The next day, Nate visited Princess Lyra in the palace and was about leaving when the princess insisted Mia should see him off back home with a fruit basket. Ethan declined and insisted on carrying the fruit basket by himself, but the princess insisted that her maid Mia carry it for him. That princess insisted that her maid Mia carry it for him. On their way to Nate's village, they reached a bush path shaded by towering trees. And Nate then told Mia that she could now go back and no longer accompany him. He thanked her for escorting him, and they both parted ways. When Mia had walked a few minutes, she realized she was still carrying the fruit baskets and had forgotten to give them to Ethan. She hurriedly went back to give it to him, but could not find him. She was surprised not to find Ethan because they had just parted a few minutes ago. She then decided to walk down the bush path further to see if she could find Ethan. As she was walking, she heard a strange sound. When she turned around, to her greatest shock, she saw Ethan transforming into a half-human and half-snake. She quickly hid behind the tree so he could not see her when he turned around. Mia was so terrified and shaky, she tried her possible best not to scream or make any noise. Ethan then walked further into the thick bush until he was out of sight. When Mia realized that he had left, she ran as fast as her legs could carry her back to the palace. She went straight to the princess's room to tell her what had happened. What? Mia hesitated over her next words for the next few minutes, but until he said, the princess was very angry at Mia. She said to her, "I know you've been having bad feelings about me marrying Ethan, so why go to this extent of lying to me about him, saying he's a monster? You know my marriage is a few days from now and you're trying to ruin it." Mia turned to the princess with tears in her eyes and said, "Please listen to me as a friend and not a maid. I wouldn't want to destroy your marriage or plan evil for you. We've been friends since childhood. You don't really know this man very well. You've not been to his village before, let alone meeting his family." Princess Elle replied and said to Mia that Nate would be coming with his family to the palace for the marriage rites. Then she would be meeting his family. Mia replied and said to her, "Why don't you come with me and see for yourself? Then, if I am wrong, you can do whatever you want to me." Good. What I do, I saw him turn into a monster. The princess stared at Mia for some time and then accepted to follow her. When they reached the bush path, Princess Elle was becoming scared because the path was so lonely and scary. She then said to Mia, "Why would Nate live in this strange bush path?" Mia told her to follow her and try not to make any noise. They went further into the bush, noticing unusual claw marks on nearby trees, but could not find anything. The princess said to Mia, "You said you saw him turn into a half-human and half-snake. So where is his house? Because I can't see anybody here. And I don't think anyone would live in this kind of place." Mia said to the princess that she was very sure she saw him turn into a half-human and half-snake at that very spot. As they were about leaving, they also heard a strange noise from afar. As they turned, they saw Titian as a half-human and half-snake. The princess was so scared and shocked she let out a loud scream. That was when Ethan realized that both of them had seen him. He chased them. Both the princess and her maid, Mia, ran for their dear lives, but were not able to meet up with them. He then returned back into the forest. When Mia and the princess reached the palace, the princess was panting and breathing so hard with fear. Mia calmed her down. When she was calm, she then apologized to Mia for doubting her and being stubborn. However, Ethan, on the other hand, after realizing that he had been caught, never returned to the palace again. And that was how the princess escaped getting married to a monster. The lesson of this story is always to listen to the advice of your friends and not be stubborn. The lesson from this story is that we should always listen carefully to the advice of those who care about us, especially when they express concerns based on observations or experiences. Blindly following emotions or desires without considering cautionary warnings can lead to unforeseen dangers. Trust and wisdom from friends and loved ones are invaluable in making wise decisions. Thank you for watching my channel. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories and lessons. See you next time.
There was once a reckless young man named Daniel who inherited a massive fortune from his parents. He spent his days throwing wild parties and surrounding himself with women and friends who enjoyed his wealth. One morning, after a particularly crazy party, when Daniel woke up, he felt so sick, vomiting several times. He was so disappointed that none of his friends stayed back to ensure he was okay. As he sat on the bathroom floor, he felt lonelier than usual. His parents were no more. He had no siblings, and his friends obviously flocked around him for their selfish gains. Suddenly, a strange longing crept over him. He wanted someone who would care about him for who he was, not for what he had. But marriage was out of the question because Daniel did not believe in love. So who could give him the kind of unconditional affection he craved? A child, he said to himself, but he laughed it off because he knew it was impossible, because he was sterile. Daniel was unable to have a child. Years ago, after one of his many careless one-night stands, he contracted chlamydia. By the time he sought treatment, the infection had already damaged his reproductive system, leaving him unable to have children. He burst into tears as he realized how his poor decision had messed up his life. Then, out of the blue, he did something he had not done for many years. God, if you fix my body, I'll make a donation to the church. He repeated over and over, clinging to hope that God would see his desperation. 2 days later, he went to the hospital for his usual health checkup. In faith, he asked the doctor to check his reproductive system. In his heart, he hoped that God had performed a miracle. Later that evening, he received a call from the doctor. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniel. There is no change. You will not be able to have children." After the call, he burst into tears again. "Of course, God will not help someone like me," he said, amidst his tears. But God had a different plan for him. Weeks later, Daniel received a call from a hospital. A woman named Clara had asked to see him urgently. Daniel was shocked to hear her name after so many years, but he went to the hospital. There, he found Clara, pale and frail, lying on a hospital bed. The room had a faint smell of antiseptics, and the sound of distant beeping machines filled the air. The doctor explained that Clara had cancer and was in the final days of her life. Daniel felt sympathy for her, but could not understand why she had called for him, especially since he had treated her badly during their short relationship years ago. "We have a 4-year-old daughter," Clara said weakly. As briefly as she could, she explained that after their affair, she realized she was pregnant. Not wanting to have anything to do with him, she successfully raised the baby on her own. But now she was ill and thought their daughter, Emma, needed to know her father. Daniel was shocked. Now that his miracle was here, he could not believe God came through for someone like him. Over the next few weeks, he stayed by Clara's bedside. It was the only gift he felt he could give her. Every day, Clara's friend would bring Emma to the hospital, and Daniel always looked at Emma with love. She was his favorite part of his day. They clicked so easily, and every time he held her in his arms, he felt blessed to be holding his own miracle in the flesh. The walls of the hospital room were adorned with handmade drawings from Emma, featuring bright suns and flowers, which added a cheerful touch to the somber atmosphere. After Clara passed away, Daniel became Emma's full-time guardian. His life changed completely. He gave her the best clothes, toys, and even enrolled her in a great school. His days now revolved around work and his daughter, not parties or wild living. However, his friends were not happy with this new Daniel. They missed the Daniel who spent tons of cash at clubs and unnecessary events. Dan, you're acting funny. I have 3 kids, and I'm not as boring as you, his friend Sam told him one day. Daniel ignored him. Although he missed his party days, he was enjoying the new life he had created for himself. One day, he returned home from school with his daughter, Emma. Just as he was about to enter his house with her in his arms, his neighbor called out to him. Daniel was shocked. She was speaking to him. Yes, it was a luxury estate where people minded their business, but it felt as though this particular neighbor and her husband despised and ignored him because of his wayward lifestyle. Wow! Such a pretty girl! The woman, whose name was Elsie, commented, and Daniel walked toward his gate to speak to her. They greeted and introduced themselves, and Daniel told her that Emma was his daughter. The woman played with Emma, and Emma cheerfully smiled back. Just as Daniel was beginning to head inside, the woman said to him, "You have such a precious gift. I hope God blesses me with a child someday." Daniel saw how she immediately became sad. He felt sympathy as he was in that position before. He agreed with her in faith and stayed longer before heading inside so Elsie could play with Emma longer. Days after that, whenever Daniel and Elsie would bump into each other after school runs, she would play with Emma as usual by his gate side. As time went by, she invited him in to see her husband, Henry, and slowly they became family friends. One evening, he received a call from his friend Sam. "Where are you, Daniel? The event has started." Daniel was confused as he had already told Sam that he would not be attending his birthday party, as it was at night and Emma's nanny would have closed for the day. But Sam insisted. "Dude, it's not a club event. It's just a small gathering. I always show up to your events." Sam continued to insist. Daniel realized he was right. Daniel realized he was right. Daniel was silent for a while, thinking of what to do with Emma. Suddenly, he remembered Elsie and Henry. He knew they would love to have Emma for some time, but he was not sure about the timing. He quickly rushed over to them, and they agreed to keep her for a few hours. Immediately, Daniel left for the party, hoping he would be back in about 2 hours. But he was wrong. When Daniel arrived at the party, it was not the small gathering Sam had claimed. It was a club with loads of women and drinks. He wanted to go back, but he decided to go in, stay for an hour, and leave. But Sam had more plans. Coincidentally, during that period, Henry and Elsie had been undergoing a 7-day spiritual cleanse with a spiritualist in quest for a child, as they had tried and failed to conceive in every way. That same evening, just as Daniel dropped off his daughter, the spiritualist came for their usual night prayers. The man sat in silence, claiming to be in communication with his deity. Then he said, "We need a contact to invite your child, who has refused to come, to enter your womb." The couple became confused. They asked him if the millions of money they had paid him was not enough to contact the child they wanted. The man shook his head and said it was only the first step. He then took a long look at Emma, who was absent-mindedly playing in the corner of the living room. The soft glow of a nearby table lamp illuminated her tiny face as she moved her toys around. "What a coincidence that this child is here today. We will use her to reach out to your unborn children." The couple immediately understood what he was implying and refused, saying that the child was their neighbor's. The spiritualist told them that no harm would come to the child. He would give her something to swallow, which would make her unconscious, and in the next 2 hours they would make prayers while the child went into the spirit world to do the needful. But he was lying. He knew the couple was desperate and wanted to use it as a tactic to get more money from them. As for the substance he wanted Emma to swallow, it was merely a concoction to put a person to sleep, which he carried around alongside his other herbs. Over at the party, Daniel was about to leave when Sam noticed and began to tease him loudly. "Where is the latest nanny in town headed? The party has not even started. The party has not even started." The people around them laughed, and those who knew the old Daniel agreed with Sam. With their constant teasing, Daniel felt his ego being bruised and decided he would stay a bit longer and show them how to party the Daniel way. He went out and called Henry, telling him there was severe traffic and it would be best if he found a hotel to stay for the night, as driving late was a risk. Henry, who answered his phone on speaker, got a thumbs up from his wife, and he told Daniel not to worry, as Emma was asleep and safe with them. As soon as he got off the call, the spiritualist said, "What other sign do you need? Everything is aligning for your favor." The couple looked at each other, hugging themselves and crying in each other's arms. It had been a long time of childlessness. On a normal day, they would have said the spiritualist sounded bizarre, but desperation clouded their judgment, and they gave him the go-ahead. After all, like he said, it looked like everything was aligning in their favor. Emma was given the concoction, and she fell asleep as planned. The prayers began, and the spiritualist assured them that Emma had begun the journey to find their missing children. After the prayers, the spiritualist instructed them to let Emma sleep because she would need all the rest she could gather to be healthy the next day. They followed his orders and sent him a huge amount to appreciate his work. As they dropped Emma on the bed, she opened her eyes slightly and went back to sleep. The couple was happy that indeed no harm came to the child, and they went to bed. What they did not know was that later that night, Emma eventually slipped into a coma because her body did not react well to the concoction. The following morning, Daniel showed up at his neighbor's home to get Emma. As he waited, he began to hear scattered footsteps and panic upstairs. About 2 minutes later, he saw Henry rushing down the stairs with Emma in his arms and Elsie following behind. Apparently, Elsie had tried to wake Emma up, but she did not respond, so she alerted her husband, and they both decided to come downstairs with Emma. Daniel immediately took his baby from them, and they all rushed into the car and headed to the hospital. The ride was filled with tense silence, broken only by the sound of Emma's faint breathing. "Your baby is in a coma. I hope we can save her," the doctor said to Daniel. He asked Daniel questions that could help him treat her while he waited for her lab results. Henry and Elsie were also questioned, and in fear they denied knowing what had happened to her. But Elsie was not strong at heart. She went to the corner where she thought no one was listening and called the spiritualist, explaining that the substance he had given the girl had made her unconscious. Fortunately, the doctor overheard her conversation and privately alerted Daniel, who immediately called the police. The police arrived, arrested the couple, and took them away for questioning. Now Daniel was left all alone with Emma. He began to weep because the doctor hardly gave him any hope. "I do not know what to say, Daniel." She was brought in very late. Daniel called his friend Sam for comfort, and indeed Sam offered him some comfort. But just as they were talking, he said, "Bro, I have to go. My kids need me now. My wife had to watch them all night while I was out. I can't let her handle everything. You know, family comes first, man." Daniel felt foolish. Listening to Sam prioritize his family. If only he had done the same for Emma. The next days were very tough for Daniel. He showed up for Emma every day. He prayed for her, talked to her like she could hear him, read her favorite bedtime stories, and even told her jokes, hoping to bring her some comfort. The walls of the hospital room were covered with cheerful posters featuring animals and smiling children, which Daniel had brought in to make the environment less clinical. One day, just as unexpectedly and miraculously as she had entered his life, she opened her eyes and woke up. Daniel was overjoyed. He felt honored that God gave him a second chance, but he knew there was more work to be done. Daniel distanced himself from his old friends and completely let go of his old lifestyle. He sold his luxury mansion and moved into a smaller but luxurious apartment, one that allowed him to stay close to Emma. He ensured to prioritize her well-being. And as the years passed, Daniel often marveled at how one small child had turned his reckless existence into a life filled with meaning. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a story of redemption and love. Remember, our actions have lasting consequences, but it is never too late to make a change for the better. Cherish the people who truly matter in your life and strive to create meaningful relationships. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and comment on what you've learned. Stay safe, stay kind, and until next time, goodbye. Once upon a time, in a village cradled by the arms of ancient hills, lived a beautiful lady named Sita. Her heart was as vast as the sky, and her kindness a river that never ran dry. The cobbled streets of the village often echoed with laughter and chatter, and the aroma of freshly baked bread from the baker's shop filled the air. Everyone in the village admired Sita, not just for her humble ways, but also for how she brought joy, like the sunrise after a stormy night. She could make a crying baby smile and turn a cloudy day sunny just by being there. Sita, however, nursed a silent sorrow. Her greatest wish was to hear the laughter of a child that was her own. She longed for a daughter to love, to teach, and to hold. She would often sit by a baobab tree in the village square just to watch little children play, as her heart whispered for one. One day, an old woman approached her under the tree and asked, "My daughter, why do you always sit here and watch those children all day?" With a heavy heart, Sita tearfully answered, "Mother, I have been married for years now, and I have no child to call mine." The old woman sighed and told Sita that in the village there was an old legend about a tree deep in the forest that could make wishes come true. This was no ordinary tree. It was older than the oldest man in the village, and taller than the oldest man in the village, and taller than the highest hill. They called it the wishing tree. The woman's wrinkled hands trembled slightly as she gestured toward the distant hills where the forest began. One morning, when the dew still whispered secrets to the grass, Sita set out to find this tree. She walked under the shade of giant trees and followed the songs of birds, her sandals brushing against the soft forest floor until she stood before the grand wishing tree. The tree's leaves shimmered like 1,000 tiny stars. With a voice full of hope, Sita spoke to the tree. "O wishing tree, hear my heart's deepest desire. I wish for her daughter. I wish for her to be beautiful, with a smile that could light up the whole village." She was so excited that she forgot to ask for one thing, for her daughter to have a kind and honest heart. The tree listened, its leaves rustling softly. A warm light enveloped Sita, and she felt something magical stir within her. The air around her seemed to hum with life as she made her way back to the village, her heart bursting with gratitude, not realizing that her wish was only half fulfilled. In time, Sita's wish came true. She gave birth to a baby girl, whom she named Leela. Leela was indeed beautiful, with eyes that sparkled like the clear blue sky after a storm, and a smile that bloomed like the first flower of spring. The village rejoiced, for Sita's happiness was their happiness. The whole village came to see Leela, and everyone agreed they had never seen a child so lovely. Sita's heart swelled with pride, but as Leela grew, so did Sita's worries. Leela was not just beautiful, she was the most beautiful girl in the village, but she was also as troublesome as a monkey stealing bananas. She told stories that weren't true, took things that weren't true, took things that weren't hers, and laughed when others would frown at what she did. Sita taught her daughter about kindness and truth, but Leela didn't seem to listen. She was too busy admiring her reflection in the river or finding new ways to dodge her chores. The villagers started to whisper, and Sita's heart felt heavy, like a rain cloud ready to burst. Her daughter was a gift, but her behavior was becoming a curse. As the sun climbed and dipped day after day, Leela grew taller and more beautiful, if that was even possible, but her heart did not grow kinder or more honest. Her beauty was like a bright lantern with a flickering light inside. The people in the village shook their heads, for Leela's beauty was now talked about with sad sighs. She didn't use her looks for good. Instead, she wandered into the shadows, where whispers and coin changed hands, and her choices led her down a path that made her mother weep. Sita's heart was heavy, heavier than the biggest stone in the river. Her daughter had become a liar, a person who traded love for money, a person who could not see the beauty in a good day's work or the smile of a neighbor. Sita tried everything to guide Leela, but it was like trying to hold onto water with open hands. In the midst of this, a prince came to the village. His eyes found Leela, and he couldn't look away. He saw her long hair, her perfect smile, and heard her laugh that sounded like a melody. He didn't see the sadness she brought her mother or the trouble that seemed to dance around her. The prince, blinded by love, or maybe just a wish to be with someone so beautiful, asked Leela to marry him. He wanted to take her to his palace to make her a princess. Sita's eyes filled with tears, not of joy, but of fear. Could this prince see the daughter she saw? Could this love change the path Leela was on? Leela said yes to the prince, her eyes shining not with love, but with the reflection of a future she thought would be as shiny as gold. Sita felt a small hope, like a single star in the night sky, that maybe this was the answer to a wish she hadn't even known to make. Leela's life seemed ready to bloom like a rose in the prince's kingdom, but thorns were hidden beneath her beauty. She wore the prince's ring, but her heart wasn't true. Old habits clung to her like shadows, and one moonlit night she slipped away from her prince's side. The guard, who had always smiled a little too long at Leela, met her outside the palace walls, and they made off together. Their laughter was a whisper, lost in the wind, but their betrayal was as loud as thunder. When the morning came, the prince, with a heart turned heavy and cold, couldn't look at Leela. His dream of love shattered like glass under a boot. The palace that was to be her new home turned its back on her, and Leela returned to the village with eyes that couldn't meet anyone else's. Sita's sadness was a river that couldn't be stopped. She walked to the wishing tree, her feet finding the old familiar path. Why, she cried to the tree, I asked for a daughter, and you gave me sorrow. The tree listened with the patience of the ages. It rustled its leaves, and the wind carried its voice. You wished for beauty, it said, but you didn't wait for the full blessing. A good heart needs to be wished for with patience and care. Sita's tears fell, feeding the roots of the tree. She had been in such a rush to have her wish granted that she hadn't stayed to finish it. Now she saw the price of a wish made in haste. Her daughter was as beautiful as the sunrise, but as lost as a star during the day. Sita's eyes, blurred by tears, looked up at the wishing tree, whose leaves whispered softly. Can anything be done? She asked, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. The tree's branches swayed, and it spoke a truth as old as the earth. There is one way to mend what has been torn. A sacrifice must be made for the heart to be reborn. Sita's heart, which had known so much love and so much pain, didn't hesitate. I will do it, she said, the love for her daughter shining in her eyes, brighter than any fear. You understand? The tree's voice was a gentle rustle. This means you will give up your tomorrow for her today. With a nod that stirred the air, Sita stepped forward. She thought of Lila's laughter as a child, the hope she had felt with every hug. She would give it all if it meant her daughter would live a life of kindness and honesty, a life that would make the village smile instead of frown. The tree's golden light glowed warmly, and as Sita stepped into it, she whispered, For my daughter's heart to be true, I give mine. The light swallowed her whole, and where Sita stood, a flower bloomed at the base of the tree, its petals the color of dawn. It was a mother's final gift, her love the deepest magic, the kind that changes fate. The forest was silent, holding its breath as Sita was taken by the tree. The animals, the birds, even the bugs, felt the weight of her sacrifice. The spirits of the forest whispered among the leaves, carrying the tale of the mother who gave everything for her child. Leela woke to a world that seemed different. The air was still, the village quiet, and her heart, for the first time in a long while, felt heavy. She searched for Sita, but found only an empty home, with a stillness that echoed too loudly. Days passed, and Leela's footsteps led her to the wishing tree. The villagers spoke of Sita's sacrifice, a story that made Leela's heart ache in a way she couldn't understand. She saw the flower with petals of soft light, and a truth settled in her. Leela sat under the tree, the place where her life had begun with a wish. Her beauty had always been a shield, but now it felt like a shell, empty and hollow. She thought of her mother's smile, her warm hands, and the love in her eyes. For the first time, Leela saw her reflection, not in water or a mirror, but in the memories of her actions, the lies, the theft, the choices that now seemed so ugly. She realized that her beauty was nothing without a heart to match it. The transformation didn't happen in a moment, but each day Lila tried to be better, to be the daughter Sita had hoped for. With every good deed, her heart felt a little less heavy, and the beauty inside her began to match the beauty that everyone could see. As the seasons changed, so did Leela. She worked hard to mend the wrong she had done, to weave kindness into her days. The villagers saw the change, like a desert blooming after a long-awaited rain. Lila's beauty was now a mirror of her heart, and her actions spoke louder than the whispers of her past. She cared for the young and respected the old. She shared what she had and looked for no reward other than the warmth it brought to her heart. The son of the wealthiest man in the village noticed Leela, not for the curve of her smile, but for the generosity in her spirit and the truth in her eyes. He saw the strength in her eyes, from helping others, and the laughter that now carried joy instead of carelessness. Their love grew not from a wish, but from shared moments and mutual respect. When they married, it was not just a union of two hearts, but a celebration of a journey. Leela didn't just become a wife. She became a beacon of hope. The village no longer spoke of her as just a beautiful girl, but as a woman of virtue. They remembered Sita, whose love had been so strong it reshaped the fate of her daughter. And so the story of Sita and Leela became a tale told from one generation to the next, a reminder of the power of patience, the virtue of a good heart, and the endless reach of a mother's love. It was Sita's legacy living on in her daughter's actions, a legacy that turned a wish into a blessing for all who knew the tale. The lesson to be learned from this story is that patience and virtue are the truest forms of beauty, and the mother's love has the power to transform and redeem. Also, when you wish or pray for something, be specific so you won't end up like Sita, who had only half her wish come true. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the story of Sita and Leela. This tale reminds us of the power of love, sacrifice, and the importance of nurturing virtues alongside beauty. Let it inspire you to cherish patience and kindness in your own life. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales. Together, let's continue exploring the timeless lessons hidden in stories from around the world.